Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is Dave Opton speaking, and wherever you're joining us from, both Bill and I are delighted that you've taken some time to join us for today's program, and we're certainly going to get into that just as quickly as we can. I just wanted to take a minute or two here before we get going to just kind of review the bidding, if as they say, in terms of kind of how these things run. So that they were all on the same page and you know what to expect. First of all, this is essentially kind of more like a telecom or a conference call as opposed to a formal webinar. By that I mean that neither Bill or I have with us a formal presentation. You know, like you're normally used to seeing in webinars. We're really simply here as resources to try to share with you our opinion, our suggestions, our experience, if you will, to respond to and react to whatever issues you feel we can be of help with. So it's really, the agenda is built by those of you who are on the call, not necessarily by Bill or myself at all. And the way that's done is through the questions that you would like to put to us. And for those of you who've been on these calls before, you know that all you got to do is just take a look over there to the right. For those of you who are new, just look over to that dashboard. You will see an area where you can type in your question. Works pretty much like instant messaging that most of us are used to. Just go ahead and do that, and Bill and I will get to just as many of these during the course of the hour as we can. And don't be worried at all about, you know, kind of embarrassing yourself or confidentiality. I'm the only one that can kind of see the questions, number one, and even though I can see the names, I certainly we don't even use names. We'll just go with the questions. So feel free, comfortable to jump in and go ahead and start pumping those in as quickly as you would like. And just one other thing on the housekeeping side, for those of you who have joined us on these calls before, and I know many do, it's very possible that a subject is going to come up that you've heard discussed on a prior call. That's obvious. That happens because you know, the questions are coming from the audience. I think it's even though we may have talked about it, we also have to appreciate that it's the first time that person has had an opportunity to ask that question. So don't be concerned if that happens, and in fact you may pick up other ideas on the same subject as we go along anyway. And lastly, and obviously whether it's this program, a formal webinar, or something else, we certainly work very hard to try to provide the programming and content that you find useful, and therefore following the program you're going to have a chance, you'll get a link to give you a chance to give us some feedback on today's program, and we certainly hope that you will take the time to share that. We do read it, we react to it, and obviously it's helpful. So with that by way of background, we can kind of get going here. I want to take also a second here for those of you who haven't had a chance to check out Bill's background, to welcome Bill to the program. Bill Crigger, just by way of background, he's got more than 30 years experience in kind of three key areas, so he brings a very rich background to us today. More than 30 years coming in Fortune 100 corporate environments, very active in the entrepreneurial space, certainly a subject that's of interest to a lot of our members, as well as the academic world. On the corporate side, he is a human resource executive, spending most of that time in the retail, grocery, and distribution fields. On the entrepreneurial side, in 1994, he was the co-founder and continues to manage a human resources consulting firm based in Charlotte called Compass Career Management Solutions. And as I said, been involved in that since 1994. The company focuses in career transition assistance, coaching, career strategies, leadership development, and succession planning, just to name a few. On the academic side, back in 2005, he became an adjunct faculty member at the University of Phoenix, and in 2009 became the area chair lead instructor School of Business, serving as liaison between the university and the undergraduate faculty within the management operations and project management curricula. He, just from an academic perspective, holds a BA in marketing and a master's in industrial relations from the University of West Virginia. Bill, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Dave.
You ready to go?
I'm ready to go. I'll have to ask for an increase based on all those credentials. Gee.
Well, if I'd gone through all the awards and everything else, we'd be halfway through the program, so I don't want to do that.
That's what happens when you've been around a while. So.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, and before we get into the questions, I just Bill was hoping that we're coming toward the end of January. We just heard the State of the Union. We saw the numbers coming out from the Department of Labor a week or so ago on unemployment and so forth. And so, in terms of working with your clients down in just in your part of the country, or just as a general observer of the kind of the career management space, any particular thoughts on how things are going and what people might expect, or just from your perspective?
Well, I think everybody's preparing for a significant improvement in 2015, and we're seeing that. A lot of folks that continue to do the networking and those kinds of things in December are starting to get offers now in January. I actually think we're going to shift to more what I call a buyer's market, meaning the person doing the job search is going to have more leverage than they've had for 7 or 8, 9 years. Some companies are actually beginning to talk about sign-on bonuses again. They tend to be in the IT space where they can't find the qualified people, or a niche space, but that hasn't happened for a long time either.
No, it sure hasn't.
And but some things don't change, and the people that are the executives that are able to differentiate themselves from the competition seem to be landing faster. And there's one little pivot point there that I find myself working more with people on, and that is you need to know yourself. Know thyself, because it seems like we as executives in job search get so focused on that next goal, we forget what we really want. And those questions seem to be tripping people up as they go through this long process of employment, which I guess is another point. The process seems to be getting much longer than it was in the past. So used to be telephone interviews. If you had those, could you walk, talk, and chew gum? Now they're like the second face-to-face interview. Yeah.
Certainly the length of the process is something that bugs the heck out of a lot of people and has. But I would certainly agree with you, at least from our perspective. And I've read it sometime, and also in talking with members, that I think the market is slowly shifting, although at the end of the day, you really have to slice it and dice it, because, as you say, that some of the areas where there's more demand, you're going to see that a lot faster than other areas which may be still in a contraction mode. Anyway, let's go ahead and get going here. Let me start with, and just a quick reminder here to those of you who might have come in a little bit late. This program is all built around your questions, and Bill and I are going to try to share our thoughts with you on whatever is on your mind. So if you have something you'd like us to try to discuss or get to, we'll get to as many as we can. Just look over to the right, type your questions in, and we'll get going. Let me start with this one, Bill. This member says, I apply to open executive positions each week, but I'm unable to open the door for in-person interviews. I've had an outplacement company critique my resume, and I feel it's very good at this time. Yet, HR staff don't seem to be taken by it. They don't call me. Do either of you have any thoughts or ideas on how to best open that door? Bill, any thoughts for this person?
Well, first of all, if you're talking to HR, you're talking to the wrong people. And having been one for a long time, HR at all levels just sorts. And so that's the first thought that comes to mind. You need to talk to the people that would be your boss in that area. That's where you start your targeting. And by saying you're applying to open jobs, that infers, I think, that you're applying online.
That's what I would say here, yeah.
And so that's never the best approach. 80% of the people we work with, and frankly, I think it's a little higher, but they find their jobs through networking. You need to find a way to leverage your network. So, for instance, if you see an opening online, you can apply. I'm not sure that's the best use of your time. Then immediately spend the rest of your time trying to determine who you know or who knows somebody in that company so that you can bypass human resources, at least for the initial foray. Because human resources is not going to call you back. They don't know you. They're swamped. They're busy. And their job is to sort out the applications or resumes that come in for the hiring manager. So, people you need to do things to make you feel like you're accomplishing something. But if 80% of the jobs are found through networking and you're going to spend 40 hours a week in job search, that means 32 hours a week you're going to spend in networking-related activities, which is not applying online.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I guess the only thing I would add to it is, and it's hard to tell because of the brevity here, but I think it's all too easy sometimes to fall into the trap of thinking that the reason that you're not being contacted is the direct result of someone not reacting positively to your resume. I mean, while that certainly could be the case, it certainly does not mean that it is the only reason by any stretch. And indeed, it might well have no bearing at all on what you've experienced, to Bill's point. And particularly if you're applying online, if you can imagine the volume of stuff that goes in there, you don't even know if whatever it is you send in there, somebody even looked at it, much less reacted to it, one way or the other. So there are just all sorts of factors that could come into play here. That said, it doesn't mean that, as long as you feel that your resume is representing you at the moment the way that it should, then I would just keep on trucking. It may simply be a case here of reflection of the marketplace, for one thing, and secondly, as Bill has already pointed out, if you're spending a disproportionate amount of your time, responding to things online, the fact that you're not hearing back anything surprises me not at all.
Yeah, and even with networking or online, it is a little bit of a numbers game, and so you have to keep playing the numbers. And then I tell the folks I work with, if they knew who you were, they would probably talk to you, but you can't get past that. And then one of the things I encourage folks that are working with outplacement firms, which is not very popular with the big corporate outplacement firms, is go to your counselor and ask them who is he or she going to introduce you to. Mm-hmm. Because they have lots of contacts, and they should be able to pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I know this Dave Option guy. Let me introduce you to him, and then maybe he can introduce you to other people. So take advantage of those folks.
Okay, let's see. This question says this. It says, it's been many years since I have been in the job market. I'm looking for someone to review my resume and provide constructive feedback and or rewrite my resume. How do you suggest I find someone who can help, possibly with medical device or biotech, pharma, or life sciences? Let me say this to this particular member. There are a gazillion ways that you can get somebody to look at your resume. You could spend the next 6 months doing that. As a member here, one of the benefits that you have of membership is you have the opportunity to have someone take a look at that for you. It's complimentary, it's part of your membership, and if you have not taken advantage of that, I would strongly urge you to do so. Now, what's the value of that? The value of that review is not that it's complimentary. The value of that review is that every person who does that for us, we have vetted, we know them, we trust them, and the opinion that you will get is somebody's honest opinion, period. So if you haven't done it, very easy thing to do, and that's exactly what you kind of what you should do. Bill, when anything you want to add to the whole resume process and that sort of thing?
Sure, and I don't want to sound like a commercial, but one of the reasons I was excited about partnering up with ExecuNet is the process, the systems, and the documents that they can help job seekers develop are just phenomenal. We're both on the same page philosophically in terms of what it takes to market yourself. And having said that, a resume is not enough. It's one small marketing document in the total folder of documents you need. So if you go to buy a new car, what do they give you? lots of brochures, lots of handouts, lots of color, lots of graphs. So what's the difference between marketing a car and marketing an executive? In my mind, not a whole lot.
Well, it's definitely a sales process. There's no two ways about that.
Yes.
Bill, this came in. This person wanted to ask you this question directly, and I guess it refers back to your opening remarks about kind of what you were seeing in the marketplace and the unemployment rate. And I was just wondered whether or not the lower unemployment rate that you were referring to takes into account professionals who simply have dropped out of the market, so to speak.
Well, that's the big philosophical argument that I think the reality of the way the statistics are calculated, no, it does not take that into account. It's allegedly people who are actively looking. But even having said that, folks I know that I just know personally that may have been out of the market for 18 months or more are starting to get good leads, starting to get interviews, and that's why I think the market's turning. Somebody has a job today, it's pretty easy to find a job, but if you've been out of the market for a while, there's lots of things that might work against you emotionally, and those folks are starting to get good leads, so I think that's really the key.
Yeah, and yeah, it is a philosophical thing, but whether they're included or whether they aren't, you know, overall, certainly the economic conditions and indicators tell us that things are getting better for sure.
And here's a good indicator, Dave, to kind of answer that question. We're being asked now to design more training programs for companies than we have in the last 8 years. So that means they're ready to invest in employees, which has to be a good sign. Yep,
I certainly agree with that. This question says, how do you network when you're sitting at the helm of a firm and you'd like to make a move within that industry? It's very challenging to remain discreet. Do either of you have any suggestions? Bill, I'm sure you've worked with clients in the past who've been faced with this. Your thoughts?
It does get a little tougher, but there are a number of organizations that exist for people that are a variety of positions, including the CEO and CFO and CIO and all that kind of stuff. And so you can begin to meet people within that industry and just find out what's going on with them. You know, the whole part of networking that I think we forget, it's about helping first and then getting second.
Yep.
And so you can meet people and you're on the same wavelength. You can walk the walk and talk the talk. There are other organizations outside your industry that you can go to. And if people say, why are you here? I just wanted to learn more. You know, it's continual learning whether you're 21 or 81. Doesn't make it easy to do. I can make things sound like rose glasses, it's easy to do, but yeah, there are lots of organizations out there. So just identify some organizations. Your problem's probably going to be finding the time to try to get to some of these and build these relationships.
Yeah, and it definitely is about it is about the relation, and it is a relationship business. We use a phrase a lot that effective networking is about giving, it's not about getting. And if you go into an encounter, whether it's for whatever reason it is, with that kind of just an attitude about how you're going to play the game of life, a lot of this feels a lot different. But to the particular question, I would say I think there are a number of things that you certainly can't be as open as you obviously would be otherwise. However, there are plenty of things that probably go on within your industry segment that you could participate in. Because it's of interest of you professionally, not because you necessarily are, you know, going in there with the idea of trying to make a change. But it certainly gives you an opportunity to expand your personal and professional network in the segment within which you're interested. My suggestion to, for example, and you may very well be a member of a, you know, an industry-specific association where up until now you've been kind of in the directory but not necessarily involved. This is an opportunity, again, if you can find the time, to get involved, to maybe go to their conferences, their seminars, their workshops, maybe be a speaker or things of, you know, things of that nature. But you've got to give yourself the opportunity to expand the contact base. Otherwise, it's just, this is going to, you know, obviously make it a, you know, a lot slower to make the kind of change that you're looking for.
And that triggered an additional thought, Dave. The trade shows. Trade shows are a great way do all the things
Yep.
you just mentioned, but don't forget the vendors that are there. Because all companies, somebody in the company talks to vendors. The vendors know more about what's going on in the industry than probably anybody. And so as your networking people, be sure and get the vendor cards and start some relationship with them. One, maybe you can save your company some money and do better, but, you know, these vendors may know what's going on in XYZ company long before the public does.
Good point.
Is there any way they can network through ExecuNet members?
Absolutely.
To achieve that goal?
Yeah, I mean, we have well, I'm going to take you up to the well, let me do it now, just since you brought it up, because there are many of you on the call who may have already noticed that we have radically changed the design of the site here in the last week or so. But if you haven't, or you're new to it, let me just show you a couple quick things here along that line. When you go into ExecuNet, if you look up into the right-hand corner, there's a login thing, and once you've logged in, if you mouse over that login thing, you will see a list here that allows you to basically manage any part of your membership, and that includes what Bill was just talking about. If you look over here, you see the thing that says My Network, or you look over there and you see your messages. These are all, and there's an area here for searching members. It works pretty much like you can on LinkedIn. You can slice and dice this in a gazillion different ways and find other members, and you have the ability to message them directly. And the nice thing here is that, first of all, you don't have to go through anybody, and secondarily, you've got a nice icebreaker in the fact that you're both members of the same organization, and can certainly, you have the chance to look at their profiles and begin to, you know, it's just another way of trying to expand your network. And to that end, let me just add here, one of the most important things you see here is my profile. And if you have not had a chance to get in there and make sure that your profile is presenting you the way that you want to be presented, you definitely should do that. And I'm not just talking about your picture, I'm talking about the introduction, talking about several aspects of it, because your profile is the first place that recruiters are going to come. It is the first place that other members will come, and so it's important that that they see you the way you want to be seen. What I've thrown up here is just if I clicked on my membership, you can see how it divides the site up. So that, and again, here we were just talking about the resume. You want to schedule a resume review? There it is. You just click on it. They will set it up for you. But a way to control your settings, to get into editing your profile, your network, and other things. And this is what I meant about you know, kind of what the editing the profile would look like. And it just go in, take a look, and make sure that it's got you where you want to be. If you need help with it, pick up the phone, give member services a call. They'll be happy to try to help you. I threw on this last slide here, by the way, just because there's an area in the profiles that a lot of people miss because it's kind of down toward the end. But this area you see here that says More About Me gives you a terrific opportunity to respond to a number of different statements that, taken in total, I think you would agree, would give whoever is looking at this a better chance to understand you as a person, not just an executive who has worked, you know, X number of years at ABC Corp, but a person who has a value system, who cares about you know, how they go about managing and so forth. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, I would commend it to your attention. Okay, let's see here. Next question. Do network connections really refer colleagues to top jobs that much, or do they just treat one another to LinkedIn endorsements and lunches with best wishes? Bill, your thoughts?
I think the answer is yes.
Yep.
A little bit of both that goes on, and that's, you know, why it's critical to prioritize, if you can, your networking. And then again, you have to know yourself. You know, it's hard for somebody to help if you don't know what you're looking for. But yeah, the top executives are the ones getting the calls to recruiters, And maybe that's the question you ask. So, when's the last time you got a call from a recruiter, or what kind of recruiters are you getting calls from? What are you seeing in the job market, as you mentioned earlier, Dave?
Yep.
And there's some that are going to buy you lunch or a hot dog or whatever, coffee, and give you a referral or a recommendation on LinkedIn. That's all they're going to do. And that's not bad, but that's not what you want.
Yep. Here's a stat for you that I've always found fascinating. And having been through this process not once but twice in my life, I certainly can support what Bill is saying. And I hear this from members all the time. At the end of the day, it is rarely, and I do mean rarely, that your, whatever you would define as your A-list of contacts at the start of a career transition that actually are a linchpin in leading you to a positive result. It just doesn't happen. The vast majority of folks that we have talked to over the years tell me that when they look back on the linkage process of what took them from where they were to where they ended up, it started with someone they did not know at the beginning, which is another reason why we pound the drum as hard as we do on expanding your personal and professional network. And you already heard Bill say that in his experience it's 80%. I don't know what the number is, but I know by far of the 4 ways that people actually make job changes in this world that I know of, which are in no particular order. They can answer an ad, they can be recruited, they can do some sort of a direct mail campaign, or through networking. Networking is by far, nothing else is even close. And as I alluded to earlier in the call, sometimes we fall into a trap, particularly with the technology that's around today, to think that sitting behind a keyboard and firing off resumes all over the planet to job postings is a productive exercise. I'm not saying not to do it. I'm saying just make sure that you're using your time wisely. Bill, anything you want to add to that?
Well, when I work with somebody, I'll draw like a molecule on a piece of paper, and with you being the nucleus, and then you draw a little straight line out, you draw 4 or 5 little other circles. That's your immediate contacts, as you're saying, and you're exactly right. They're good people, but it's the third, fourth, and fifth level on that molecule where you get your hit. It's clearly somebody you don't know that has no prejudices, no vested interests. They just decide they like you and want to try to help.
Right. Let's see here. It says, next question. Based on your networking versus online comments, what are your thoughts on career coaches charging $8,000 to $10,000 for an engagement? Seems like a lot of an investment for networking help. This is a question that comes up, or an area that comes up for discussion quite frequently. And let me just say this: when you are dealing, well, how do I want to say this? You're dealing here in an unregulated environment, number one. So if you are looking for help, and a lot of people do, and there are a lot of places where you can get it, and it's very legitimate. On the other hand, there are a number of companies around, and they tend to sprout up more quickly in bad times than they do in good, which makes sense, whose only goal in life is to get you to write the biggest check they can get you to write. And they are really, they are terrific salespeople, but they certainly are not there to really provide legitimate help to people. So you have to be extraordinarily careful. We've been around for 27 years, so we know who a lot of these firms are. If you have been approached by someone and you'd like my opinion, you can see my email right there, or give me a call. If I know anything about them, I'll be happy to share it with you. That said, I am a very strong believer in getting help if I feel I need it. And there are a number of resources around, including ExecuNet, who can provide that kind of help if that's something that you're interested in. And certainly, Bill Crigger is certainly one of those for sure, and he operates in that space, and so I know he knows exactly what I'm, what I'm talking about. But anyway, you need to be careful, and if you're getting help from the right kinds of sources, then whatever you spend is going to be worth it. Bill, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I get very frustrated with that question in the sense that, and I don't mean this to be ugly, but way too many human resource people that are in the job market think they're expert coaches and resume writers, and that's just not true. I have not run into an HR person that can really write a good resume because they know what they're used to seeing, not what somebody else wants. So yeah, I would say, again, that doesn't mean there aren't some good ones out there as well. So don't misread what I say. But just like anything else you do, check the people out. What's their background? How do they get to where they are? How long have they been doing it? Oh yeah, can I have a couple of references? Now here's one that nobody will give you. Can you give me the names of 3 people that you didn't help as much as you wanted to help? And just the way they respond to that question will give you a lot of insight. Because I got people that I've worked with that we didn't work well together chemically or whatever, and I have processes I go through to help resolve that issue. But it's the customers that you couldn't help is where the real pearls are. But yeah, I mean, if you're stuck, I like what you said earlier. You need to have some help. There's lots of ways to get it, lots of ways to pay for it, but it's pretty tough to do it on your own if you're stuck.
Yep, that's for sure. Okay, and let me again remind you, those of you who are on the call, if you've got questions or just look over there to the right, type them up, and as I said at the outset, Bill and I will get to as many of those as we can. This next question, Bill wants to know what is your philosophy when going from a C-level position to a senior mid-level position? The proverbial question is, why would you want to take a lesser role? Fact is, you love what you do, but at this stage of life, balance of business and family is your priority. I'm sure, Bill, that you've had many of clients who have gotten to that stage of their career and have tried to battle the bias of why the heck would you want to take a step what the others would perceive as maybe a step laterally or backwards. And how do I make that believable to people?
Well, the good news is, based on the size of the baby boomer workforce, more and more people are making that decision because nobody wants or can retire at 60, 62, or 65 anymore. And so just based on the way that question was phrased, Dave, this person could sell himself in a face-to-face conversation.
Yep.
And that's really kind of the key. I have seen people, heard stories where they've tapped on the desk, very friendly tap with their finger, pretty much telling the person on the other side of the desk that same kind of thing. Maybe not so much the balance, but I'll guarantee you that you will be satisfied with what I bring to the table. And then explain what does that mean. And I have a good answer in terms of why you want to take the step back, and it's all about what can you do for that company. It's almost like the question, well, you're overqualified. Okay, fine, what do you want me to forget? But take that and say, here's how I'm going to use that skill sets to help you accomplish your goals. And if you looked at the websites and network with folks, you'll have a pretty good idea what the company's goals are, so you might even be able to put dollars and cents to it, to some of your ideas.
Yeah. Well, there's no question of it, but, this person's, is there a bias in this regard? Sure there is, and there are a gazillion more as well. But I think if in a face-to-face situation, if the company is worth its salt and is talking to you because they're serious about what you might bring to it, then I think they are going to be much more inclined to accept the truth, which is, hey, I don't have to grow up and be king. This is what I've got, a number of years experience. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. And I'm at a stage in my career where I certainly want the stimulation and certainly the excitement that I think will come from working with an organization such as yours, which I've done a lot of research on, and you guys represent the kinds of things that I would like to do at this stage of my life. And It gives me a chance to achieve two goals, not just one. And you have a chance to have those conversations. I believe that most people would react positively to it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I tell folks I'm working with, and kind of tongue-in-cheek, there's a new trend going out there in the world, and it's called truth. I think people are react much more positively today to a truthful statement like that than they did 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's probably true. Okay, let's see. What's the standard these days for recruiters to follow up with a candidate that he or she has presented who is just interviewed with a hiring manager? Should the recruiter let the candidate know if the hiring manager would like to move forward to the next step or not? What's professional for the recruiter to do with regards to follow-up, if any at all? And how long does a candidate consider this an active opportunity? I would expect the candidate to continue looking for other opportunities, of course. But what do either of you think is generally the standard these days? Bill?
That's a really good question. We probably need to run that by a recruiter. But, you're the customer. There's two customers in this process, who the company the recruiter is dealing with and you. And I would hope that they would stay in constant contact with you. If nothing else, it's a matter of, I can't pin the hiring manager down about next steps because they're trying to make some money by placing you there. But I hear stories, probably do today, from the folks that do an excellent job of communicating to recruiters that present you and say, it looks pretty promising, and then you never hear back from them.
Yep.
And so that's where, you, the seeker, needs to try to stay in contact with the recruiter. I mean, don't bug them to death, as I like to say, but, always ask the recruiter, just like you would ask a prospective employer, what's the next steps, what's the possible timeline, and then that gives you the opportunity to call and say, we talked 2 weeks ago, you suggested you might know something by then, I'm calling to follow up with the recruiter.
Yeah.
I don't, but other than that, nothing comes to mind.
Well, this is one of those things like, it works both ways, and I don't mean to be flip about this, but it's kind of one of those where my first inclination is to say the answer is there is no answer, because it's a subjective thing. I mean, I have my own value system that says in terms of professional behavior and what I think is appropriate and what I would strive to do. And as Bill has already said, that covers a wide spectrum. From people who would follow up and do the kinds of things that I think most of us would expect, all the way down the other side where they put you through all kinds of hoops and you never hear from them again. And I've talked to plenty of members that has happened to. And I mean, it is what it is. So that being said, what I would do is I would on the candidate side, I would follow up in terms of what I feel is the appropriate way to do that, and hope that the recruiter would do the same. And if they do, that's great, and if they don't, they're not going to. If I was dealing directly with a company, I would do exactly the same thing, although quite frankly, depending on their behavior, that may tell you something about the culture of the organization, but that's, at least that would be part of my interpretation in terms of kind of observable behavior, if you will. Let's see here. What are your thoughts and or experiences with the 3-minute videos that are posted online with your social media accounts, for example, LinkedIn? Alternatively, they are sent to employers along with the resume submission and application process. How common is this? How impactful is this? It's still a relatively new thing, but certainly something that is happening. Bill, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm probably not as up to speed on that thought as some others. It's happening. I'm not seeing happening too much at the senior levels.
Yeah.
That still seems to be more face-to-face contacts, that kind of stuff. At the mid-level, at the a different age range than perhaps a senior executive, that seems to be going on quite frequently. I know it scares the human resource people to death, for fear of somebody making a decision on some regulated, non-compliant issue.
Yeah.
But there are lots of ways to market yourself besides that. Now, having said that, part of what a senior executive is marketing is the fact that they have senior executive experience. And so the fact that your picture might be out there, which it should be on LinkedIn, is not a negative thing, because if they're wanting to hire somebody with your kind of experience, they're not trying to hire a 30-year-old probably.
Yeah. You know, I guess I would take a similar tact. If it's something that you feel is useful to you, there's certainly no harm in doing it. I'm not sure it's going to become the de facto standard. I certainly believe, and since we tend to operate at you know, pretty senior levels, I have not seen it, nor have I talked to members who have told me that it's something that they feel is more commonplace. Certainly doing video interviews, screening interviews is a lot more commonplace these days, just to save travel costs and things like that. But in terms of marketing, using it as a collateral marketing material and stuff like that, it is, you know, it's certainly not, you know, anything that is leading as far as I can tell from what's going on. Certainly at senior levels for sure, because we would have heard a lot more about that from our members than we are. What is your take on the state-of-the-art on well-crafted phishing letters or value proposition letters that are sent to C-suite people without a resume? Supposedly, studies show that they are 5 or 6 times as successful as unsolicited resumes, partly because they don't get as readily diverted to the rejection mail pathways that many resumes do. The recipe for these letters in the coaching literature varies all over the place. Short, long, me-centered, you-centered, quirky, sober, stories and yarns, etc. Bill, your thoughts on that kind of a campaign?
That's quite a question.
Yeah.
Actually, I recommend to the folks we work with that, you know, if you're having trouble getting in front of the right people, do exactly that same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, send a well-crafted bio sketch or one of our value-centric kinds of things that we use, because it is different. You know, remember, I think I said, you know, 40 minutes ago, it's about differentiating yourself in the market. And this person is exactly right. This will come across and somebody will say, wow, that's pretty neat. Let me look at it later. That's all you're trying to get done is get in the let me look at later stack. And even if it's, and we're referring here to mailing something in U.S. mail, but occasionally it works through the applicant tracking software type things, because it's so unusual it gets kicked out on the positive side. But yeah, and I think cover letters ought to be short and sweet to the point. You need to have some research, back to his thing about quirky or whatever. I never got into the mailing your cover letter inside a tennis shoe to a company or something like that. But you need to know the culture of the company so you can address or create your cover letter with that in mind. There seems to be another little trend that's gone on about companies wanting to know more about you, the person, and so maybe having a little personal touch in the first 2 or 3 sentences. But the key to cover letters, you got to grab their attention. Don't put the important stuff at the bottom paragraph, because they're not going to get that far.
That's for sure. That's for sure. You know, as I said, there are 4 ways that people, you know, that I would say where people make a change, and direct mail is one of those. And this is a kind of a variation on the direct mail theme. Is it effective? Well, it wouldn't be a channel if it weren't, you know, if it didn't have some, you know, some successes. But again, when you compare it to the results that come about as from networking, it's very it's small. But that doesn't mean that it cannot be effective in the right circumstances. In my own experience and in talking with folks, I would say it is most effective when you have done really thorough research on the target organization that that you're trying to get the attention from. And that means knowing as much about the person that you are actually going to send this to as you can find out. And if it's a public company, it's a lot easier than maybe if it's private. But in this day and age, it's usually not impossible. And understanding what the issues are that are probably facing that organization or that executive, so that you can craft this in such a way that it will begin to get the kind of attention that Bill is talking about, and go at it that way.
Yeah, and it's meant for a very targeted approach. You're exactly right, Dave. It's not, I wasn't thinking about the mass or direct mail
right.
in terms of numbers, but yeah, a very, very singularly targeted approach.
Yep. Let's see here. This person wants to know that when you are reaching out, trying to network, is an email considered poor form? Should you try and call or have a live conversation? I guess I would say in this day and age, and again, it's not so much about what you say; it's how you say it. I think email is considered, certainly a very common way of communicating these days. So if you're comfortable with that, I don't see, I don't see anything wrong with it. It's maybe as much about your comfort level as it is about anything else. I think the more important thing is to come back to, again, the how you go about trying to expand your network. And as I mentioned earlier in the call, if you're coming at it with the idea of bringing something to that encounter that you believe will be of value to that person, as opposed to saying, hi, I'm Joe Dokes, and I'm having a terrible time with this, and I thought maybe you could help me, is at the very least come into that encounter with the idea of helping each other. And then whatever channel you decide to use in doing that, I think is really kind of up to you, Bill.
No, I agree with that. I've got some clients that I can call all day long, and they'll never respond, but I can shoot them an email, and they respond in seconds. And so it's a little harder to do, but if you could do some research about the individual, as you mentioned earlier, you may find out their preference for communication, and I'd go with whatever you find.
Yep. Oh, this is a question I think that crosses as a lot of people have felt this, and particularly given the marketplace and the economy of the last few years. This person says, how do you fight job search burnout? You have networked, you've had your resume rewritten, you utilized outside help, you've done all the things that, quote, you're supposed to do, but you still feel that your search is stalled and obviously, are disappointed and is just feeling pretty burnt out about the whole process. Easy thing to have happen, Bill. What counsel would you have?
Yeah, it's very easy. It's really a great question, and it's a shame we didn't think about that before the burnout came. But don't be afraid to take some time off in job search. Now, I'm not talking 3 months or 4 months, but I encourage people to go do something fun. Take one day a week and go do something with their spouse, their girlfriends, their kids, or whatever, and forget about job search. And that's when your best ideas will come to you anyhow. And don't be afraid to reward yourself. Sounds like this person's worked hard, so reward yourself. Do something fun. It doesn't have to cost money. But sometimes it's exercising that brings you back. Sometimes it's being around family or other people. Sometimes it's being around strangers. I used to like to put my boat in the water and go fish by myself. I never caught any fish, which is kind of ironic. But sitting out on the lake where it was quiet, the birds were flying over, I didn't care whether I had a job or not. And so when I came back, I was relaxed, I was comfortable, I had many, many ideas. I thought of names of people I should contact that I didn't think of. So you've got to get yourself into that space by doing whatever it is that you like to do outside of work.
Yeah, I think, obviously we're all different. So, whatever it is that helps you to relieve the kind of stress that this process generates, you would know better than anybody. But what I do know, and again, certainly from personal experience, is that this is it is very much an emotional roller coaster for sure. And so there are days when you feel it's going pretty well, and other days when you just can't figure out. You figure, well, I must be doing something terribly wrong. So it's not easy. I would, and this, by the way, is an area where working with a coach sometimes can be very helpful, because having somebody who's not as emotionally involved in it as we are ourselves, at least I found personally, was very helpful, because if nothing else, it helped me to keep things in perspective, which is not an easy thing to do. And I guess I would also say that another thing to think about doing, because as Bill said, I mean, this is just not something that you can be doing, 10 hours a day. It's too emotionally draining. You've got to try to make sure that you are trying to lead some kind of a balanced existence. And one of the things that certainly I would suggest that you do to try to do that is to get yourself out of the house, to get involved in some things. And again, not necessarily because it's something that, is tied directly to your job search, but maybe is something that you're doing because it's meaningful to you on a personal level or a professional level. Maybe that means because now one of the benefits, if there are any, in going through a search, is that you do have some time, and maybe it's a chance for you to get involved in a community organization that you care about, but you've never really had the chance to get involved with, or some other not-for-profit, which allows you to, one, get out from behind your computer. Two, it helps to keep you mentally sharp and to utilize some of your skills. And another, by the way, of a side benefit of getting involved in something like that, particularly not-for-profits, is not-for-profits have a lot of usually very senior people on their boards. Not a bad way to maybe get a chance to meet some people that you wouldn't otherwise have a chance to meet at the same time. But I guess the best answer I could give you would be to try to make sure that you're trying as best you can to get a balanced mix of activities in your life, and a perspective that no matter how bad it may feel at the moment, there is light at the end of this tunnel. There just is.
And you raise a good point, Dave. You need to have somebody to talk to, and it's probably as good as spouses and significant others and so on and so forth as can be. It's probably not them. To your point, they're emotionally involved. And further down on my bio sketch there, and I'm going to mention it, but I'm a Stephen minister in our church. Stephen Ministry is a non-denominational program. And basically, the Stephen minister is a layperson that's been trained to walk with you through your journey of whatever the situation is. And so that's a non-connected person that you can have a conversation with, just like perhaps a coach, where they're not judgmental. Again, it's confidential, so you have a chance to get things off your chest, and actually you end up resolving your own problem. It's not their job to solve the problem. So there are other options out there like that, depending on the community you're in.
Right. This question is, what's the best way to seek a job out of state when you haven't made the move yet? In this case, this person is talking about from the Midwest to Florida, but the geography is not important. The question is, what suggestions might you have when you're someplace and you want to get to a different geography? Any suggestions on how to make that a little easier?
Well, the only thing that comes to mind is I knew a fella that I got to know through some networking that was in Chicago, wanted to come to Charlotte, so he put together a plan. And while he was in Chicago, he developed a network using contacts at associations. The board of directors are on different various associations like the PMI group and that kind of stuff. And so he'd spend 2 weeks in Chicago setting up appointments, and then he'd come down here and meet with appointments for a week or so. He was here on what we might consider unusual times, Labor Day and Memorial Day, because there's lots of things going on then. And so, he had invested time and money, but he landed pretty quickly. You can do some of that networking telephonically. You can still look up, the XYZ organization and see who's on the board. I'm thinking about, the different associations we talked about before, and try to connect with them over the phone. But at some point in time, I think you need to be there because, again, it's back to the face-to-face relationship.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that as well. Question is, how should I approach the switch from being the owner of a startup consulting business owner to pursuing a full-time job back in the corporate world? I'm glad he asked this question because this comes up with some frequency as well on both sides. People who are going from corporate and want to go into the consulting world, and then someone who's already done that and has now decided they want to go back onto the client side. Bill, I have to believe that that's not the first time you've heard that one.
Yeah, and the answer is kind of very carefully. It's how you proceed.
Okay.
But the key, and it's throughout job search, is identifying how you can transfer your capabilities into the corporate environment.
Uh-huh.
And so again, that's how you differentiate yourself. Here, the big irony is companies want entrepreneurs. They want that entrepreneurial thinking. The bias is you're used to doing your own schedule. You show up at 10 o'clock and leave at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can't work for a boss, and on and on and on. Some of those are myths, but what seems to work best, and again, it's back to targeting companies you want to work for. Where can you transfer your skill sets? By the way, what are those specific skill sets and capabilities? And then putting together marketing documents that help you sell yourself. Because you might be pleasantly surprised to find out that more companies are interested in entrepreneurs. For instance, if you've got startup experience at a consulting firm, maybe you start targeting smaller businesses that are similar to startups, or larger venture capitalists are looking for people with startup experience.
Mm-hmm. True. I would. I'm not sure I have anything to add to that. I think it makes all kinds of sense. Here's a comment that came in from one of the callers just on the thing we were just discussing, and she wanted to share this with the group. She says, I agree on having side activities in career transition. I am on a programming committee of a major not-for-profit, making significant contributions as a volunteer, and am surrounded by highly professional people. I feel that I make a difference for them, and it is a differentiator. Gives me additional leadership skills, etc. Volunteerism adds meaning to and connections when you're in career transition. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks.
She said it better than I did, but that's really it. Okay, Bill, we're coming up here on the top of the hour, and unfortunately, we're going to have to bring this to a close. For those whose questions we didn't get a chance to get to, I'm sorry, but we did the best that we could, and hopefully you'll join us for calls down the road. But Bill, having been here today and what we've talked about, is there anything in particular you'd like to share with the group before we close?
Yeah, really, two things come to mind, and one sounds very simple, but I find that these 5 items are key, and so the executives on the call think about what made them successful in their jobs. It's because they knew how their company made money. They knew how their company lost money, so they could help that not happen. They knew how their company gained customers. They knew something about how their company would lose customers, and they knew something about the vendors. So those are 5 things when you're doing that thorough research that Dave mentioned earlier that I would really zero in on, because those are key points of differentiation for you. So how does the company make money? How do they lose money? How do they gain customers? Yeah. How do they lose customers? And then something about the vendors, which is kind of the hidden part of companies. The second thing comes to mind, if I may, and I'm going to do it, so then you can bleep me out, David, is...
no, please, go ahead.
I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm in the process of gearing up to do the ExecuNet Connections meetings. And we're targeting to have those on the third Thursday of the month. And we're trying, we're going through the kind of process to get situated up and running. So kind of watch your emails. Anybody within shouting distance of Charlotte is welcome to come.
Oh, that'd be great.
I'm targeting if those are familiar with the greater Charlotte area, the east side of Charlotte, so people from South Carolina and Lake Norman area can get there easily. Looking at a Thursday, probably 9:15 in the morning to 11:15, trying to work around the Charlotte traffic.
Not a bad idea. That would be great, Bill. I'm delighted that that's getting ready to gear up. And we have meetings at a lot of other places around the country. For those of you who, if you haven't had a chance to attend, we certainly would urge you to do that. The only reason we hold the meetings, by the way, and if you haven't gotten anything from this conversation today, you certainly have gotten that. It gives people one more opportunity, in addition to all the other things that we would hope and expect that you would be doing, to expand your personal and professional network. That's why we have them. And so certainly would hope that you'll take advantage of that if there's one in your area. So with that, Bill, thanks again for joining me. to our audience for joining us today, and certainly we would look forward to your joining us on other calls down the road. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy your weekend.
And thank you.